Now, one of the things we need to do is assess security risks and actually talk about the treatment of those risks. As an auditor, we need to be familiar with how the organization that we're going to audit has approached their idea of risk assessment and treatment. In other words, what are they willing to accept? How do they want to deal with risk? Now, risk assessment should be able to identify, quantify, and prioritize risks against the criteria that were set forth in the risk acceptance policy. Now, the criteria, the design of it, is to have priorities for managing security risks, for implementing controls to be able to reduce or mitigate those risks. The process of risk assessment is designed as a systematic approach of risk analysis and comparing the estimated risks against those criteria, right, those priorities, to determine the significance of that risk. And it should be performed, the risk assessment should be performed whenever there are changes in the environment. Changes in the environment can simply be through the process of adding new equipment. You might have a change of security requirements. It might be because of new technologies or new programs, or just the fact that we see new types of attacks on the horizon. And of course on the risk situation. And the idea is of course risk assessment should be done before we even begin the audit, part of the planning process. But we know that we should constantly be doing risk assessments whenever we see these types of changes in the environment. The concept of treating risk is the decision we make on basically what criteria do we use to determine whether or not we're going to live with a certain amount of risk. Now, the options we have, of course, a lot of the ones that I've been talking about or alluding to, is the reduction of risk through the use of appropriate controls. But then again, we have to make sure that, when we do the cost-benefit analysis of those controls, the amount that we're reducing the risk might not even pay for the control that we've put in. Now, again, if it's just on a pure price point, that might be an issue. Then again, we might have to put the control in anyway because of regulatory requirements. Don't you like the way I can talk into circles about this, as far as what you have to look at? I'm just trying to give you lots of options and things to think about as you talk about risk treatment. Anyway, so that might be one treatment, is to reduce risk. The other is to accept risk. Now, as long as the acceptance of the risk meets the levels and the criteria that matches the organization's policy, then that works out well. You could also avoid risks by stopping the actions that can cause risks to occur. That means if you don't want outside hackers breaking into your network through your web server, you could just remove your web presence. But then if you're an e-commerce company, that wouldn't make sense to do. But that's the example. You can also transfer the risk, and we can transfer it to insurance companies, that if we do have a material damage, that they would compensate us for that loss. We could transfer it to our suppliers. Again, so if the material that comes in, doesn't work very well, or it breaks, it's within contractual time periods to be replaced. That's up to the suppliers to do. Those are just some options that we have to look at as far as what the corporation, the organization, wants to do for the treatment of risk. Now, if the goal is through the use of controls to try to reduce risk, then we need to make sure that we get the ones that will do the reduction that we want to an acceptable level. That means you need to look at, number one, the requirements and constraints of the cost benefits and of the appropriate regulations. You need to know what the organization's objectives are. You should look at the operational requirements and constraints. Oh, that's another big thing. You might buy this really unique vendor's control solution, let's say firewall. I like to use that because it's an easy example. But I might have people who've never heard of that company, have no idea how to implement it. So I might have constraints as far as the resources to even be able to work with that. And of course, it comes down to cost effectiveness. Do I want to spend $1 million to reduce my risk $100,000? Right? And again, I'm just throwing out numbers. But you understand the idea is that reduction worth the cost of the control? Now, remember that some controls might not apply to every information system environment for all organizations. So just because you audited company A and you found a solution that used a certain control, and you see company B seems to have some similarities, there's no way that you can assume that that control for company A would be the perfect solution to company B. In fact, you'd almost be kind of guilty of doing a cookie cutter solution. Remember that not all controls apply to all companies, and so that's a process we go through to look at the cost benefit analysis to make sure that it meets regulatory requirements, business requirements, organizational objectives, and it does the reduction that you're looking for. Finally, it's important to remember that no set of controls will ever give you complete security. There's no such thing as 100% security. That means management should implement some ongoing features like ongoing monitoring and evaluation, and realize that they are things they could do to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of security controls. And again, that's the ongoing monitoring and evaluation. If through monitoring and evaluation, you see that you can make some changes, let's say, I'm going to use a firewall example again, with some of the actual security policies, well, that might make it more efficient and more effective. It's just a matter of having these systems in place to be able to constantly improve the controls we have.